Christian, I guess that should have been expected here, but it really reflects the feelings in the electorate about these different candidates. That's a crowd that will likely give Donald Trump a standing ovation tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the polls right now, Donald Trump is the front runner, and the crowd today really just showed that. I think the loudest, most energetic response from the audience came when North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson endorsed Trump right there. Everyone stood to their feet. They were super excited to hear that. So Chris Christie's comments weren't well received, but it's very clear that that was a Trump audience.
Indeed. And, you know, Megan, there's a question of how exactly this is going to shape up in the next couple of days, because everyone else on that stage is gunning for Donald Trump, but only a couple of these candidates will actually name him. We're getting the full spectrum of strategies here, from Chris Christie, punch him in the nose, to Ron DeSantis, refer to him without naming his name, to maybe Asa Hutchinson, who's going to join us here a little bit later, who has a completely different approach to all of this. Which one's working?
None right now. If you look at the polls, as Christian said, you know, Trump is ahead of DeSantis even by some 40 points. This is after being indicted on 37 federal charges. So it's really hard for any of these candidates to break out at this moment. And you're going to see at this conference you saw today and you'll see into tomorrow, these candidates trying to sort of carve a lane for themselves, but they're speaking to a very narrow audience here. This is the Christian right that they're speaking to, and they're having to talk about issues that many of them have tried to shy away from, for instance, the topic of abortion and whether or not they would support, say, a 15-week ban on abortion, as has been pushed by several. And because of the crowd and because of the year anniversary of Dobbs, they're having to weigh in on this.
We'll talk more about that 1 year mark in just a moment. Christian, when we talk about the evangelical community, are we talking about MAGA? Is there a difference at this point?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think it's fascinating that Donald Trump brought Mike Pence on to get the evangelical base. But now Trump has taken that base and Pence is trying to get them back. I spoke to a lot of voters today, and they were telling me that, you know, they want someone that they're confident can stand strong in the values of Christians, but also who's a fighter. And that's why this base is really sticking to Donald Trump.
There's a question of the pledge as well. Relatively new Republican presidential candidate Will Hurd, who we just learned will actually be at that conference tomorrow, vowing not to sign the RNC pledge to back the eventual Republican nominee. That was supposed to be part of the criteria to get on the debate stage. Here's what he said.
I won't be signing any kind of pledges, and I don't think that parties should be trying to rig who should be on a debate stage. I am not in the business of lying to the American people in order to get a microphone.
He's not the only one who has said this. In fact, Asa Hutchinson, the aforementioned, who will join us later this hour, has indicated the same. Chris Christie, the same. Is the RNC going to have to change its rules?
I mean, even Donald Trump hasn't
agreed
to this rule, which is you know, the first time that we've ever really encountered this. And I don't think anyone in the field particularly likes it. But today, the chairwoman of the RNC said that they're sticking with it. I don't know what that means for the debate stage come August when they all convene.
The issue of abortion came up, and I'd like to ask you both about this, because obviously this is a major topic at an event like this. Former Vice President Mike Pence talked about it at the Faith and Freedom Summit. Listen.
So I want to say from my heart, every Republican candidate for president should support a ban on abortion before 15 weeks as a minimum nationwide standard.
Minimum of 15 weeks. That's not unlike what Senator Lindsey Graham was proposing. We saw Ron DeSantis go much further with a 6-week ban in Florida. Is that the baseline? Did Mike Pence just sort of describe the baseline for Republicans in this campaign?
Yeah, I think that Republican pro-abortion groups are saying that candidates should be supporting at least a 15-week abortion ban. But it's clear that abortion is really going to be a big issue for Republicans heading into 2024. Talking to a lot of the attendees at the event today, they were saying that, look, they want a candidate who can speak strongly and defend a 15-week minimum ban.
And are all the candidates on board with that?
Yeah, I think President Trump is unique in that he hasn't directly talked about abortion too much. But
Yet
one of the
he takes
things
credit for striking down Roe.
Exactly. One of the things he'll say all the time is there would be no Dobbs decision if it weren't for me.
That's right.
So abortion is really going to play a huge role in 2024.
It's a question about what happens next here. As you both know, Democrats, beginning with the president, but also Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill, want to have a legislative answer to this, and they're still gunning for it. We heard earlier today from Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, in a news conference, remembering tomorrow is 1 year since the Dobbs decision. Here he is.
Unlike other enlightened decisions that the Supreme Court has reached throughout the years, which enhanced freedom, the Dobbs decision restricted and limited and undermined freedom for women all across America.
Megan, he says Democrats have 210 votes for legislation that would essentially legalize, again, abortion for women on the federal level. 210 votes. They're promising what they call a motion to discharge, but he needs 8 more votes. Do they exist?
I think you could find 8 Republicans in the House who support abortion rights, but it would be hard to find is 8 Republicans in the House who are willing to vote that they support abortion rights. Yeah. You're just setting yourself up for a strong primary challenge from the right if you do that, not to mention being targeted by whoever the next presumptive Republican presidential nominee may be. So, while you have lawmakers like Nancy Mace from South Carolina, a Republican, who's been vocal about supporting abortion rights. I can see some of these Republicans coming out and saying, well, we want to see this go through committee, or this isn't the way it should be handled, and kind of take that procedural opposition. To put your name on it. Yes,
because
to
then you
avoid
get a primary when that happens.
Yeah, and you risk alienating part of your base, even in a general.
We did get a decision today, by the way, from the Supreme Court. It wasn't everything. They added another day. Tuesday, we'll potentially hear more opinions. Today, though, was an important one regarding policy at the border, allowing the Biden administration policy for detention and deportation to be allowed and replace the pre-existing policy from the Trump administration. This is a ruling in favor of Joe Biden's approach to direct the limited resources we have to either get people considered more dangerous or those who've recently crossed the border. Christian, does this give him cover on a very delicate issue in the presidential campaign?
President Joe Biden is really going to have to figure out how he's going to handle this situation. It's very tense. Republicans are watching very closely. I think Republican candidates, this is something that they feel very strongly about.
After inflation, this is issue number 1 for Republicans, right?
Exactly. And I think this is an issue that they can talk about very comfortably. They would rather have this conversation over abortion. So it's going to be really big for Joe Biden to figure out how he's going to handle this on the campaign trail.